3 minutes to air, 2 minutes until live stream, 3 minutes to air, 2 minutes until live stream.
Specifically have the first and last name of the speakers and then their emails. And send it to city.org.
So it's not going to be open public comment, they would have to go and register in order to speak?
The people wanting to do it remotely.
Yeah. Okay. So would it be an open Zoom meeting for them to register? It would get, only those people would get the Zoom link.
Yeah, we have to give them a deadline, don't we?
That's what I'm saying.
10 a.m. tomorrow, or 1 p.m. tomorrow,
Okay.
or 1 p.m.
On Wednesday.
Saying we have Zoom go first.
1 minute to live stream, 1 minute to live stream.
Zoom people for like
One for her, they go.
all of hers, and then the in-person.
Okay.
We are now streaming.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to City Hall. To all of you all that are here, all 6 of you, and those that are online, it's great to have you all here in the house tonight. Back in December 4, 2023, a young man was in the Ward 3 capacity and decided to run for mayor and got elected, and that made that seat vacant. Tonight, we are here to fill that seat, start the process of filling that seat. In order to do that, we need to get this meeting going. And I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. And Madam Clerk, if you don't mind, please call the roll.
Good evening, Mayor Williams,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton,
I'm here.
Councilmember Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Caballero,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
Present.
and Councilmember Rist.
Here.
Thank you very much. The dais will look a little different tonight as we have the manager and city attorney seated in the staff designated area and giving them a break tonight as we will facilitate this evening's meeting. So, can I see that? Starting out, and this meeting is recorded, so it'll be able to be referenced. There were some questions. Okay, good. There were some questions by the candidates. We are going to go ahead and address those questions now in the beginning, so you don't have to go through the timestamp searching for it. Question 1 was, is there a cap on the number of persons allowed to speak on each candidate's behalf? Each candidate, this is the answer, each candidate will have 30 minutes to have their supporters speak on their behalf. And that how we use that 30 minutes is up to you. Whether you have one person speaking for 10 minutes or if you have 30 people speaking for 1 minute, whether they are online or in person, it is up to your discretion to determine what you think will be most compelling. But you have 30 minutes and it would be up to you. Now, in order to in order to have them speak online, if they will be speaking virtually, you will need their name, first and last, and their email. And that will need to be sent to the clerk, the city clerk, at city.clerk@durhamnc.gov. Again, by 1 p.m. on Wednesday. By 1 p.m. on Wednesday, you will need to have your supporters who are speaking virtually to send their information to the clerk, first and last name, and their email address to the clerk at city.clerk@durhamnc.gov. That is on Wednesday at 1 p.m. The second question, will our speakers in support have the opportunity to participate online or over Zoom, or are they required to participate in person? That is up to your discretion. Again, that is up to your discretion. Question 3, related. Here's the question. I have several community members who would like to speak, but given the short notice, they are unable to do so in person. Is there an option for virtual comment? Again, yes. They would need to send their first and last name and their email to the clerk at city.clerk@durhamnc.gov by 1 p.m. on Wednesday. Number 4, will the 3 minutes per person be strictly enforced, or will there be more emphasis on the 30-minute total time? You have 30 minutes. It is up to you and your strategy that you invoke with your supporters on how you utilize your 30 minutes. If you don't use the whole 30 minutes, you will not be penalized, but you have up to 30 minutes. Excuse me.
So again, so one speaker could speak for 30 minutes, correct?
If they choose to. My God. Number 5, related, if the 10 speakers don't quite take up the full half hour, will that negatively impact the other candidates' time? No. No, it won't. Number 6, will we need to submit our list of speakers ahead of time? Yes. Clarification, Madam Clerk, if they're speaking in person, do they need to sign up ahead of time?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor. It would be appreciated if we received the list of all remote speakers and in-person speakers in advance, and then we can be prepared.
Colleagues, would it be okay if we just make that a practice, a procedural adjustment to this that we submit? Okay. You should provide your speakers to the clerk virtually by 1 p.m. Or in person at the start of by the start of the meeting, Madam Clerk, or would you like it also by 1 p.m. on Wednesday? You knew that was coming.
Thank you for that question. I would appreciate all of the speakers, the remote speakers and the in-person speakers as a list.
Yes.
By email to city.clerk@durhamnc.gov by 1 p.m. on Wednesday.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
candidates, all speakers submitted to the clerk's office by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, be it virtual or in person. And last question, number 7, will each candidate cycle through for their portion of the meeting, or will all candidates be present for the duration of the meeting? That's up to you if you want to stay or if you want to leave. It is a public meeting, so therefore it will be viewed by the public. So you bring your A game, and it won't be a private interview. It'll all be public. Anytime there are 4 of us or more together, it will be a public meeting. All right. Those are all of the questions that were submitted by the candidates ahead of time. All right. At this time, colleagues, I believe we are going to go ahead into the interviews. All right, and just a little housekeeping here. In addition, we will have the same questions asked to each candidate, and each member of the council will have 5 minutes to dialogue with the candidate, and we'll ask the same question each person, and we'll rotate that. Yeah, and I'll go last. So with that being said, the first person we have is,
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, so we will each ask the same question of each candidate?
you should have your questions. No, I'm sorry. You have 5 minutes.
Right, for whatever questions we,
Yep. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments by our colleagues? All right. So first up, we have Ms. Amanda Bohr. Welcome. I will say thank you for throwing your name in the hat. Congrats on making it to this round, and thanks for willing to make a sacrifice.
Well, good evening, Council, and thank you for inviting me here to talk to you about the vacancy. My name is Amanda Bohr, and I am a resident of Durham. I am a wife to Alex Williams, who you may remember from the applicant process, and a mother to a soon-to-be DPS student named Leo Williams, funnily enough. I grew up in small-town Ohio in a very close-knit community where it was the norm that we took care of each other and gave back to the community. And because of that, I think it's really become part of my identity and who I am and how I want to live my life. In 2007, I moved to North Carolina to go to school at UNC to study public health. And I moved to Durham in 2010, making Durham my permanent home in 2013. I currently work at Duke Hospital as Administrative Director in Neurosciences. And prior to that, for 13 years, I was a nonprofit administrator at Charles House Association, where we cared for people with cognitive impairments and executive function loss and their caregivers. I am here tonight in part because I serve on 2 local Durham nonprofit boards, and they are each facing their own crises. Nonprofits are really designed to care for some of our most vulnerable populations, and I have some serious concerns about their continued viability and sustainability in order to do so, given the current economic climate we are in with rising prices, workforce shortages, and funding issues. Because of my public health background, I really see the interconnectedness of all of these issues. And because of that, I think it's really important that as we move forward and grow in Durham, that we are doing so both with intentionality and sustainability. If I were to join you on the council, I believe that we could address these issues. Yeah.
Thank you. So I should have stated that. That's why I gave you an extra 5 seconds. We'll start with a 2-minute introduction, and then we'll have 5 minutes per council member for questions. Thank you for your introduction.
Yeah.
All right, at this time, we will start with Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening.
Hi.
It's such a great pleasure to meet you, and congratulations on advancing this far into the process. It's a testament of how high in regard we held your initial presentation to us. So just a couple of questions for you. Thank you for stepping into this crucible and running this gauntlet. This isn't an easy proposition, so you should be very proud of yourself, and your friends and family and supporters should as well. The Durham City Council is the final arbiter of all city matters. We're also fiduciaries of the city of Durham. So I want to ask you, do you have a particular economic theory or framework that would inform your governance of the city, firstly? And secondly, what would you be willing to raise taxes for?
Oh my goodness, so this is a very specific question, and I have managed budgets and done so in my career. As far as economic theories, I'm not sure that I can really speak specifically to those. And raising taxes is really a tough question to answer because we do, as a city, need to have revenue in order to grow. But I think that raising taxes is something that we need to look at really carefully and only do so when that need is really high. We do have to bring in the revenue, so whether that looks like first starting out with those public-private partnerships, looking at how we're already bringing in the money through property taxes, and if there is that opportunity there because we don't have the other revenue sources, I think we do have to consider it, though I think it should be our last choice.
Thank you for that. So we do a lot of land use cases, in case you haven't watched us, and gentrification is a big
Yes.
issue in our city. What are your views on combating gentrification, if you in fact think gentrification is a bad thing? And what do you think the specific powers you will have as a council member will be available to you to combat gentrification?
That's a really great question. And I think that obviously SCAD was a really big thing that you all just passed. And I have some questions about how that will affect gentrification. And I think it's really important as we do city planning to look and speak with the citizens in the neighborhoods that they live in and make sure that their voices are heard with how we plan. And I think that in those historically Black neighborhoods or other low-income neighborhoods or other spaces in Durham, that we want to really be careful about gentrification. We need to hear what they have to say and how they want to grow, rather than taking land from them or building in a way that hurts their community.
What would be your comprehensive plan to combat gun violence in Durham?
Oh, you guys are tough. So I think that this is a really, really hard question. Obviously, everybody likes the HEART program and having people who are able to respond to nonviolent crimes, and I think that there is an opportunity to expand that. I think that long-term, what you really need to do is to invest in long-term public health solutions that get to the root of the cause, and some of those things are, childhood education, social supports. How do we really support these young folks who are in these situations so they have other avenues and they have other pathways in escalation? So I think we also have to be really careful, and we have to listen to the people in the community that are experiencing the violence right now, and to make sure that they have a way to feel safe, and that we are taking this as a multi-pronged approach. So we listen to the folks who are in the situations of living in unsafe neighborhoods and helping them there, and we put into place some long-term public health type of solutions, starting with early childhood education. I think that the sooner you can start the interventions, the better.
I'm a huge supporter of the HEART program here. In your assessment, how does the HEART team address gun violence?
My understanding is that they go out to nonviolent calls, and they work with those members of the community to help them with social issues, with maybe they have specific training, sort of like a social worker, to help with mental health and those sorts of things.
My final question is a quick one and a fun one. We're brand ambassadors as well of the city. What's your favorite thing about Durham?
Oh my gosh. I always say that Durham has heart, history, resilience, and grit. And what I really love about Durham is just the diversity and the fact that it is a small, big town. I love it.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Making it a rule that no one can take my questions. That's my question, one of them. All right, Councilmember Baker. It's on
So
you.
many questions, too. So, Amanda, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. So when we think about planning, zoning, development, infrastructure on the urban periphery, on our corridors, in our neighborhoods, both inside and outside of our city, sort of the interior and the exterior of our city, what do you think are some of the things that we're doing well as a city and that we're accomplishing, and what do you think are things that we need to improve upon?
Just to clarify, you're talking specifically about growth and zoning?
Yes, planning, zoning, development, growth, yes.
Yeah, so I know that the city council has spent a long time looking at different zoning opportunities, and I think there was just, you redid the urban development ordinance. And I appreciate that we need to grow, and in order to grow, we need to have higher density housing, especially to limit the suburban sprawl, I believe is what it's called. And so I really appreciate that with SCAD, some of the things that were passed, such as having churches be able to put affordable housing on their land. I appreciate that we got rid of the parking minimum. I think that we need to have people and not cars. It also means that we also have to think about how we invest in transportation and alternative methods to that. So there's a lot that goes into this. So I think that there was a lot of positive in SCAD, and I'm really proud of the way that you all handled it so thoughtfully. I do think that there are some concerns, going back to Councilman Middleton's point about gentrification. I do have some concerns about how it is going to affect our communities and where that growth is going to go. But I think overall there is some positives.
Thank you. What are some of your top priorities around affordable housing?
Yeah, so housing is really tough. And I think that we have some opportunity here, specifically in Durham, because we have so many organizations and so many people who want to come and live in Durham, and that we need to work with those organizations because we do want them to come. We do want those large companies to come. You know, you look at is it Apple and Google who want to come here, and what is their responsibility to helping us build affordable housing? If they want access to our resources, such as land and our people, then I feel like they also have a responsibility to build and give back to the community in a really positive way. I like the approach that has been taken by the council in saying that, and maybe saying no to some proposals because the affordable housing that they were proposing in their development was not high enough. I think that the opportunity to build those public-private partnerships is really important when it comes to affordable housing. I think, as we all know, the three top things that everybody pays for, or most people pay for, and the most expensive are housing, transportation, and childcare if they need it. And those things are inextricably linked for most people. And so I talked a lot about the 15-minute cities and really being able to build the green space, develop in a way that is really intentional so that our communities become closer knit and they are able to walk or bike or take public transit to get anywhere they need within 15 minutes. And that includes all of their amenities, including work and housing, and having mixed-use housing within these 15-minute cities to hopefully lower that affordability.
Thank you very much. What are some leaders that inspire you?
Oh, this is a great question. You know, I have always been really inspired by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman who has kind of been a leader and a first and not afraid to speak her mind, but to also do so with intention and thought about how it affects other people. And I think that she really was somebody who wanted to raise up and raise other people up, and I really, really appreciated her, and I'm sad that she's gone.
Thank you very much.
Oh, all right, thank you. Next up, we have Councilmember Caballero.
Hi, Amanda. Good to have you with us. I sent my question via email, so you would have a couple, have a little bit of time to look cases up. So my question was, City Council spends a large portion of its time on zoning, and it's a large part of our job as council members. Over the last 2 years, can you tell me about a zoning case where you agreed with council's decision, where we got it right and why? And then the opposite, a zoning case where you disagreed with council's decision and where we got it wrong and why. And I do want to attribute this question to former Councilmember Reese. It is the question.
It sounds like Charlie's question.
Yeah, it is the question I was asked in your very same position.
Thank you. And we already discussed a little bit about SCAD, but I will say some of the things that I think were really positive that came out of it and the decisions that you all made as a council, again, are decreasing that parking minima, the ability for churches to build housing and hopefully affordable housing on their land, the ability to have ADUs. And while not specifically zoning, I appreciate the effort that was given to try to work with local developers in order to do this, so we don't have these huge corporations from out of town, out of state, out of country coming in to try to make these changes. So I do appreciate all of those things. I do think that there are some areas, again, that some zoning issues. For example, one of the affordable housing issues that was tied up in the zoning with the passing SCAD was about the 5-year affordability, and I think that we could have asked for more. Now, of course, I trust that you all are doing everything that you can to make that, and I understand that sometimes you have to take the good as it comes to you, but I do think that there could have been a longer period of affordable housing within those developments. The other question I had about the zoning was, I did have a question, I guess, really about the removal of the buffers in the zoning laws and how that is positively affecting our residents. And as I feel that having that buffer between housing and industry could potentially be a positive thing for the residents.
Thank you. Are there any, so SCAD was one large thing that we saw. Are there any other zoning cases that you either disagreed with or agreed with? And it's okay if that's the one you know best.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, zoning is something that is not in my day-to-day. I have done a lot of work looking at various things such as the empty buildings that we have or the abandoned buildings that we have in Durham, and I think that there is a lot of opportunity to look at how we can revitalize those and if there are zoning issues there that we can change to do so. But I'm not familiar with a lot of the zoning issues that have come before the last 2 years.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Since I have a little bit more time, I'm going to ask you another question. In your opinion, what are some supports or things that we can do to continue to support our immigrant and refugee communities here in Durham?
Yeah, so I think that it's really hard when someone comes in from another country and they really don't know a lot of what's going on. So I think obviously housing is a big one. Helping them to find a community here really helps with a lot of the other things. Social determinants of health are so important, and how do we make sure that they have culturally appropriate food for themselves? How do we have a family that could potentially be a connection, sort of like a mentor family, or that can really introduce them to all of the positives that Durham has to offer. I think that Durham has a lot to offer and is a very diverse place, and I think that having immigrants here only adds to the value of living in the city.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. Good evening. Very nice to meet you. I have just a couple questions, and I wanted to start just, I guess, with building off of that kind of zoning and planning aspect. And I know that you're mentioning you don't have that background, which is actually a good thing. I think it's beneficial to have different points of view. I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts about how our zoning and planning might have impact on our seniors and geriatric population in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot about this when it comes to, property taxes. We have people who are living in their homes for years and years and decades, and we raise the property taxes because our home values are increasing so much, and our seniors have limited income. And so when I think about zoning, I think we really need to also think about how that limited income affects them, but also thinking about those mixed use communities and the smaller communities, because we need to be able to access them and remove the isolation that sometimes they feel. So if we do something like those 15-minute communities or the 5-minute neighborhoods where we have mixed use, we can have playgrounds with older adults living nearby. We can have accessible green spaces. We can have accessible walking paths and sidewalks. And so I think there's a lot we can do when it comes to zoning to think creatively about how we include this segment of the population into our plans, because a lot of times they really are left out of the plans, and their abilities may be different, but they still have a lot of value and they bring a lot to the table. And I think we should capitalize on that.
And I appreciate that. That's helpful. I do want to dig in a little bit on your answer around racial equity and see if there's anything additionally you wanted to add to how you feel about, or I should say, inclusion and racial equity.
Yeah, so I firmly believe that anytime we are making a decision that affects other people, that we need to hear their voices. And so when it comes to racial equity, I think that it's really important to hear the diverse voice and to intentionally reach out to people with a different racial background and understand what their perspective is on that. And I think that we need to think about racial equity and inclusion in all of the policies that we do. How is it going to affect everyone, whether that is intentionally through a policy or as an unintended consequence, because that is what happens quite often. So for me, I think it's just important to intentionally be thinking about it, intentionally involving people of color in the decision making, especially when it comes to their neighborhoods. They should be the ones who are telling us what we need to do to move forward.
Thank you. And then just one last question. I'm a foodie, and if you have any suggestions on where I might want to test out here in Durham, that would be great.
Yeah, so I love Durham, and I love the food scene here. I just ate at Gear Street recently. We did Durham Delivers. I think we've had Swellies. I can never pick a favorite because I love it all so much. Some of our favorites are downtown, where we can walk back and forth. You know, I've recently started to get into some of the Asian foods, the Indian and Thai food stuff. So I would love to give you a list of recommendations, but picking one is really hard.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all.
So you don't have a favorite restaurant?
It's probably
that's a deduction.
Swellies if I was going to, yeah.
I'm joking. All right, next we have Councilmember Rist.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Bora, thank you for coming. I echo my colleagues' comments about congratulations to you for reaching this point in the process. It's quite an achievement. I've got a couple questions. One I sent you beforehand by email, so I'll start with that question. So if chosen for the Ward 3 seat, what is one thing, and not the only thing, but what's the primary thing you would like to do as a council member to help the 1 in 7 residents in Durham who currently live below the poverty line?
Yeah, so the trick to this question is the one thing, right? I think that obviously with the public health background, I'm always looking for the root cause. However, were I to come in, the first thing I would do is really want to try to decrease food insecurity and make sure that we have access to clean water for everyone. I think there is something like, I'm not good with statistics off the top of my head, but there was like 12 or 13,000 children who are food insecure, and that is really concerning. And I think that we have such a wealth of resources here in Durham with our people that if we do a better job of messaging for that, I think we can really decrease that.
I can use this microphone so I can actually look at you instead of turning away all the time. My second question is, in his press conference today, the mayor outlined his top priorities for the, oh my God, this one, yeah. Here we go. Is that better? All right. I said the mayor, something, I love the sound came, you know. So in his press conference today, the mayor outlined his priorities for the city, and included community, economic, and workforce development. So I want to talk about the middle one there, economic development, which is one of the questions I think in the questionnaire. And I'd like to ask you just to say more about how you define economic development. What's the goal of economic development? And what do you see as the ideal role the city can play in promoting economic development?
Okay, this is a really great question. And I've done a lot of work in workforce development, especially with the direct care workforce. So as I said, over and over, all of these things are very, very related. So when we want to grow our economy, obviously we need to have businesses and we need to have jobs, but we also need to think about those supports that really help folks to have these good paying and good jobs in general. So when I was doing the work with the workforce, the elder care workforce, the direct care workforce, you know, a lot of these women are women of color. They may be single mothers, and if there is one thing that would derail them, whether it's transportation that day didn't happen for whatever reason, or they couldn't afford childcare, or they didn't have housing, all of these things were issues that then affected also their employment. And so I think we have to partner with our local businesses as well as our community college, our workforce development boards, to come up with some creative solutions with our direct care workforce, with this population in mind, and making sure that they have their voices heard. To come up with solutions together is really important. But I think that there is a lot we can do. I know you are familiar with the living wage and the certification program, and I think there's an opportunity to both expand that and to make it more visible, and so that the residents of Durham are able to say, I am going to patronize these restaurants, these businesses that do pay a living wage. Of course, like I said, it is more than just a wage. I think as an employer, we also have to work to be good employers, and sometimes that means creating something like an emergency assistance fund for their employees, having flexible scheduling, looking at funding some transportation options in case of emergency. So I think there's a lot that we can do that can be creative. And this is one of the areas that I feel like I've done a lot of work on, and feel like I could bring some benefit to the council in doing.
Great, thank you. Checking the clock. With only a minute left, huh? I guess so. I'm going to skip to my last question. So obviously you've got an impressive resume. You've done a lot of work, both education, profession. You've done a lot of work on sort of practice and policy side. And actually, I gotta say, my dad was a participant at Charles House.
I know your parents, your mother too.
Yes.
Okay, we
I
talked
said about
earlier.
Charles House, yeah. So my question is, given your interest in like healthcare, elder care, and so forth, why the city council? There's also like the county commission does a lot of those issues as well. So why the council?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit about the nonprofit work that I am doing, and it is in childcare and in elder care. And so some of the things that I have seen recently is, so I'll take our preschool, for example, and the church that we are housed in is no longer going to be able to sustain to upkeep the building, and so the preschool is going to have to move out. Well, this preschool is not regulated, it's not licensed, and so we fall into this really gray zone. We also are a half day, and we can't raise enough funds to find a commercial building, because as you all know, commercial rents right now are astronomical. And so we're looking at closing our preschool, and that's maybe only 50 spots in Durham, but overall, this type of program is 900 families. And so if we aren't taking a look at our regulations and our codes and our abilities to potentially help these kinds of organizations, then we're gonna lose these wonderful programs. And that doesn't even mention the fact that then we're gonna have a church whose building is falling apart, and what are we going to do with that? The church can't uphold it, and so it's either gonna sit fallow or it's gonna be gone to a developer somewhere. And so we also lose I guess it also helps with isolation, because church hubs, as we know, tend to be older, and they tend to be starting to age out. And because of that, you're going to cut me off, but because of that, social isolation is a real problem for older adults. And so given all of these things, and that doesn't even talk about the work that I have done in our nursing homes and assisted livings, nor on the
Thank you
Durham
so
Senior
much,
Center.
Ms. Borer.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
Where are you at?
Oh, I thought you were telling me I was done.
well, yeah, there's.
That was just the penultimate question. You got the ultimate guy.
Yeah, well, he asked you at the last minute, so I wanted to let you finish your statement. But thank you for going through this process. Councilmember Caballero and I have gone through, and Baker, three of us have gone through this appointment process. Appointment?
Yep.
Oh, wow. So majority of the council stood where you are. I think mine was on Zoom, though. So thank you for being here. I am going to ask a series of questions, and I'd like for you to be as concise as possible.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Tell me, what are the psychological steps you go through when you are prioritizing respect for someone that you just do not like?
That's an interesting question. I think that it doesn't always matter whether I like someone or not. We treat everyone with respect, both privately and publicly.
Great, and thank you for that. You talked about supporting the HEART program, and you talked about mental health, and you talked about some other initiatives. Tell me concisely, what are your immediate public safety ideas? Something that won't take, time to materialize.
Yeah, I think this is a really hard question because it is a safety issue. But I think that the biggest thing is talking to the people in the environments and in the neighborhoods to see what they need, whether that is additional support. I think that there are some mental health and social welfare type of things that we could do getting into the schools younger. I'm a big proponent at starting these interventions really young at early childhood education. And right now, I know it is a hard issue, and I don't know that there's one thing that is going to address it.
Great, thank you. Do you see police officers as part of your public safety apparatus of ideas?
I believe that they play an important part of where we are and what is needed right now.
Awesome, thank you. This is the next two questions are rather loaded. Conceptualize your ideal city with 3 actionable policy steps that you would implement. I hear you speak a lot about 15-minute cities, so you can use that if you want, it's up to you. But give me your ideal utopia and what are 3 things you would incorporate to make it happen?
So I believe that we need more green spaces, especially for Parks and Rec and for the younger kids to try to combat some of that gun violence. I think that that is a really big one. I believe that we need to invest in early childhood education as infrastructure to support our workforce. And I believe that we should also be really highly looking at how to utilize these smaller knit communities and the mixed-use housing to support each other, because really Durham is here for everyone, and thinking about that from birth to the end of lives and how we integrate those populations.
Awesome. I'm going to ask this question because it's easy. It's a yes, sort of a yes or no. We have meetings on Thursdays at 1 p.m. I'm just going to be frank. Serving in government is not considered the most equitable reality, but it's the reality we have. That is only one meeting during the day. Mm-hmm. I'm responsible for assigning everyone on this council about 9 additional meetings that happen early morning, noon, evening. Is your schedule flex enough for you to meet those obligations?
It is at this time.
Okay, good deal. And last question for me, this is also another interesting question. What factors, or what are the factors that you consider when trying to support something that you initially do not support? And I can ask again if you
Repeat that
need
again.
to. What, again, psychology here, what steps do you take, or how do you define being open-minded to something that that you don't necessarily agree with?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of times it goes down to looking at the facts of the issue. So if we're looking at a policy in particular, you want to look at who it is intended to affect, who it could potentially, any unintended consequences, who benefits from it, and who could be hurt from it. And I think that as long as you have that in mind, you can come around to knowing that there is some positive in there, even if you don't initially agree with it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time tonight. And yeah, thank you. That would bring to an end your, let me just make sure I'm not missing any like closing remarks type thing. Nope. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. All right, next we have Ms. Chelsea Cook. And welcome.
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we will start the rotation.
Great. All right, good evening, Mayor Williams, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, City Council staff that's here as well. It's a real honor to be here today. My name is Chelsea Cook. I'm a proud member of the Durham community. The lawyer in me also wants to say that I'm here representing myself and not any nonprofits that I might work for. I am an attorney, but before I was an attorney, I worked in and around the Durham area. I farmed, I waited tables at various restaurants, so I have been in a variety of different places. However, I always knew that I wanted to be an advocate, so in 2015, I applied for law school. I was hoping that I could help people access a field that is often gatekept. Once I finished law school, I returned straight to Durham. Like I said, I had been in the area, and I knew that Durham was a place that I wanted to set down roots. I started my legal career as an advocate for folks who are facing criminal issues, but in the civil capacity. So I represented people who were experiencing violence at the hands of those who were sworn to protect them. My heart, however, was always at the issue that I think underlies all of the problems that we see in the law and otherwise, which is housing. You'll hear me talk about that a lot tonight, I think. In my years as an eviction defense attorney, I've gained knowledge of the interplays between state, federal, and city policies and laws. I've also worked quite a great deal with city-specific organizations, or ones that at least are partially city-specific. That includes DHA, DSS, NIS, but most importantly, I've worked with real people in Durham, and I've seen the policies not working for them. I've seen people who have to look at housing and education and healthcare and food, and they have to make a decision about what they're going to cut out of their budget. I'm here because I believe that everyone deserves a seat at the table, and I think we all understand that having that seat requires resources and it requires time. I'm here because I love the city, and I will be happy to answer any questions following.
Thank you so much. All right, so first up, we have Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor, it's an honor to meet you. Happy
you.
New Year, and thank you so
Well,
much for your willingness to step forward into this crucible, this gauntlet, and congratulations on getting this far in the process. The Durham City Council is the final arbiter of city business. We are all fiduciaries of the city of Durham. So in that spirit, I want to ask, do you have a particular economic theory or worldview that would inform your governance decisions, one? And two, what would you be willing to raise taxes for?
Ooh, that's a great question for the start. All right, my worldview. I do have a worldview where everybody has an equal opportunity to thrive in a community, and that inherently requires resources, but I think that it requires an understanding that those resources have not been equally distributed in the past. It requires a real intentionality and look towards history and also to the future. And I think we're responsible for really coming to understand what the impact of histories have been of people lacking resources, and try and find ways to make up those resources. And we talk a lot about equity as opposed to equality or other words that we might use. And I think that that is really the heart of what my economic goals would be. Everyone having opportunities, and that really means having those opportunities, not starting from a disadvantaged place. I'd be willing to raise taxes for a few things. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm going to talk about a lot is going to be housing. It's no surprise to anybody here. Y'all have read my application that that's my #1 priority. I see this every day. If people don't have safe and affordable housing, it's hard to have much else. That is the thing that I think is the most important thing that we can possibly provide for folks in this city. And other things that I'd be willing to raise taxes for, I think education is super important. I would love to have more like community-focused resources, and that would include something like community policing, that sort of thing, where we don't have to rely on folks coming into neighborhoods where they're not familiar or they're not part of that community, but we could have those centered in those local communities. I think that I went over and beyond on that question.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. One of the terms that's bandied about quite a bit in our public square is gentrification.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask, what are your views on gentrification? And if gentrification is a bad thing, if you think it's bad, what particular powers do you think you will have as a member of the council and this council in general to combat gentrification?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we can consider gentrification good or bad. I don't think that it comes so black and white. I wish that it maybe did, and we could sort of campaign one way or the other. But gentrification, as it displaces our certain communities that have been in Durham for a long time, have histories in Durham, in that regard, I think that it's really problematic. But there are pieces of gentrification that bring also with them some revitalization, particularly when it comes to transit and other things that we might invest in communities. And could you repeat the second part of your question?
What powers do you think the council has to combat it?
Yeah.
Or aid it if you think it's a good thing?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't think it's a good thing, generally speaking. I mean, I see communities disappearing. I'm watching people every day that are losing access to their housing. They're having to move out of neighborhoods where their families have been for generations. So I certainly don't think that it's a good thing, but I recognize that growth happens in a city.
Yeah, clock's ticking. No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. What do you think we can do specifically as a council to combat gun violence from a policy point of view, actual votes we can take?
Yeah, so I think I talked a little bit about this, but I do sincerely believe that gun violence is a thing that yields from communities that don't have resources that they need. So certainly in a long-term game, we can talk about resourcing, education, and those types of things, particularly housing. But also I think that we've done a great job in understanding that that not all emergencies are needing more weapons and more escalation put into those spaces. So I think that we've done a good job in, for example, the HEART program and understanding that not all
Finish your thought.
Sure, that not all situations need to be escalated, and there are opportunities to come in and de-escalate situations and potentially avoid gun violence that way as well.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker.
Thank you for coming here, Chelsea. It's great to speak with you. I'm very excited to ask this question. What are your top priorities around affordable housing?
Ooh, okay. Well, come into the weeds with me for a bit. I have some big ideas about affordable housing, and I'm going to speak, I want to say, from a perspective of renting, although I know that also access to home ownership is really, really important as well. But I'm going to speak to renting because that's what I know the best. My big ideas are incentivizing people to accept vouchers. We have a real problem in the city where we have a dearth of homes for people with vouchers, specific bedroom requirements and these type of things that are difficult for people to change, and then they don't have places to use their vouchers even when they make it through this long wait list. I also think we should focus more on low-income housing tax credits, and I do think that we should have a real conversation about restrictions on and incentives for developers who are coming into the city to maintain a certain number of affordable housing. And I know that there is state preemption in some of these spaces, but I do honestly think that there is wiggle room around that. And I really feel like Durham is a great place where people are really committed to it, that we should be starting to explore some creative solutions around that. Those are big picture ideas. I know, however, that like affordable housing is a major crisis right now. And so my second thing is about stemming the immediate tide of homelessness. So things that I'm thinking about in that are funding for rental assistance. This has been a major issue. Right now there's no rental assistance options in Durham, and our eviction rates are the highest that they've been since the start of the pandemic. So we're seeing people with not a lot of options there. And then another thing is homelessness services, and I think we could be funding those pretty immediately. There's not enough space. We all know that that's true, but there's also not a lot of safe places for people who are LGBTQ aligned. I don't believe at this time we have any wet beds, so people who are under the influence of something don't have a safe place to go. And then a smaller part under that is that also we know for a fact that having an attorney with you during the eviction process increases your likelihood of not being evicted or not getting an eviction judgment. We don't have a lot of resources for undocumented people at this time, and I do think that that's a small piece, but I think it's a group that's really missing there. And then number 3 would be housing standards. And I don't think that we can talk about affordable housing without talking about the quality of the housing that we're offering. We all know that, unfortunately, Durham has a long history of providing substandard affordable housing. We are failing, the DHA is failing inspection results at a level that's above and beyond, way outdoing all of our surrounding cities. And the things that I have seen, I mean, I just can't even explain how bad the situation is, but we've got folks who are powerless because they need a place to live, and they're forced to live in places that are absolutely not acceptable for anyone. Things that we can do around that are really concrete is that we do have an arm, we have a city inspection that's NIS, and we have sort of taken away the teeth of that over the years. And the way that I see it happening now, it doesn't have much effect. So that's something that we could do, is provide a little bit more teeth to the NIS. So that's the neighborhood inspection services. And so when they find that properties are failing, there is something that they can do about that.
Great, thank you. When thinking about the urban design of the city of Durham, those sort of older parts as well as post-World War II areas and more suburban areas, what do you think we're doing well and what do you think we need to improve?
This is a topic that I think that I don't know about as much about as I would like. So I understand that some of the amendments that have happened recently to the zoning plan, I think something that I saw that, and again, I'm going to say that I don't know as much about this, and so I don't know maybe the effects of these things, but something that I did see that I think is a great direction that we're going is kind of stemming the sort of urban sprawl. I know that there's like issues with drinking water and some other keeping areas rural, and so those things I think were quite good. And I think in general that there's been a move towards having more green space, and I'm a proponent of that within the city, and walkability and transit as well. Again, not my areas, but I know that they are closely tied with housing, and would love to see those.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Councilmember Caballero. I did put an R in, I'm sorry.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Good to see you. I sent my question via email so that you'd have a chance to think about that. And so the question is, City Council spends a large portion of time on zoning and is an important part of our job as council members. Over the last 2 years, can you tell me about a zoning case where you agreed with the council's decision, where we got it right and why, and then the opposite, about a zoning case where you disagreed with council's decision and where we got it wrong and why?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to put the same qualifications that I put before, which is that zoning is not my area of expertise. But from my research, I do not feel like SCAD was the right way to go. I think that I was around for all of the meetings, and I mean, I wasn't physically around for them, but I was reading and following along. And I know that, that we had these focus groups and that we weren't able to get documents together where folks were agreeing. And it really felt like it was developer introduced, developer led, and I'm just concerned that the voices of everyday citizens in Durham were not reflected in that decision. So that is something that I think, again, I need to learn more about, but from what I read and from what I heard community members say, that felt problematic to me. Something that I am like super excited about, though, is the community plan that was just adopted. I particularly love in that community plan that there are the voices of real Durhamites in there, and that we left the quotes in the plan. I think that is amazing, As I was saying in my introduction, I do think that having a seat at the table is really difficult for a lot of people. You have to have resources, you have to have time, you have to physically get there in order to have a voice in local politics. And that, I think, that community plan was a great way to sort of have a revelation about that, focus and center those voices.
Thank you. My next question is, what do you think we can do to support our immigrant and refugee communities in Durham?
That's a great question. I do come across quite a few folks in my practice, unfortunately, who have been they've found housing. Of course, it's going to be temporary, or someone has helped them find that housing, and it hasn't worked out in whatever way. It is not sustainable. So I think that there could be, wrapped up in the affordable housing could be more resources for folks who are coming in as immigrant populations. One thing I talked about a little bit that I would love to do more research on is we talked about gentrification earlier, but sort of having celebrations of and like places set aside for cultural and heritage celebrations. And I know we're doing some of that, particularly with some of the neighborhoods in Durham that have been historically Black, historically like Black entrepreneurs, for example. But I think that we could do more of that to celebrate the folks who are coming in from other places as well.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, and I appreciate your answers this far. I just one additional question. I would love for you to expand on your inclusion and racial equity comments. It looked like it kind of got snipped. So I just wanted you to build off of that. You could use the entire 4 minutes and 45 seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, so as a part of my job, I work with people who are poor, and this is I'm not using this term in any kind of way other than to say that their incomes are below a certain amount. And what that looks like in the Durham city is that most of the people I work with are Black, and a lot of them are women, and a lot of them are single mothers. And what I end up having to do is to explain a process to them that might inherently be unfair. They might already be in a place where they are not set up to succeed. There are many things that go into that, and by the time that they get there, they're not set up to succeed. They're not set up to do anything except for potentially have some experience in the system that's going to be violent, and it's probably something that they've experienced before, unfortunately. And I don't know if I'm the right person to do those things and to have those conversations, but what's been really humbling for me is that people have entrusted me with their stories. They've entrusted me to see their homes, which is, I want to cry when I think about that, to meet their families, to see the things that are really important to them. And the best that I can do is really listen to them. And I know that the solutions to the issues, well, I'm going to say the identification to the issues and the solutions to those issues, people in the communities already know those. They are in the impacted communities. People already understand the issues that they are facing, and they have good solutions. And so what I have tried to do is just elevate those voices. And thus far, people have really trusted me in a way that has really blown me away. So I'm really honored to even be in this position, to even have thought about running, which is something that people I've worked with have pushed me to do. So that's a true honor for me.
Thank you. I would definitely say you are exactly the voice that needs to speak on these things, because I think when it comes from voices like myself, I look so much like some of those people you talk about that people don't hear it in the same way. So I appreciate that. And I would love to hear, again, I'm a foodie, any restaurants that you like or special places I should be visiting that have really good food.
This is funny because when I was thinking of questions that I would ask, I was like, this is the question that I would ask. Best meal in Durham, which in my opinion is the Friday oxtails at the Chicken Hut. I don't think that you can go wrong with anything at the Chicken Hut, but the oxtails on Friday are like out of this world.
And now this Friday, that is what I'll be doing.
Is that a challenge? Is that a challenge?
I'm up for, I'm
If y'all want to
definitely
cook
up for
oxtails and
judging.
have me be a taste tester, I'm like so happy to come do
I'm
that.
definitely up for judging, just so you know.
All right, Councilmember Freeman is the judge. Chicken Hut, Zoilis is coming for you. All right, no, thank you all so much. And next up, we have Councilmember Rist.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Ms. Cook, thanks for coming. Again, add my thanks to, congratulations to you for coming this far in the process and for being one of the finalists for Ward 3. The question I sent to you by email, I'll repeat it again. You get the advantage now, having not gone first, of sort of having the question before you. So, yeah, if elected or chosen for the Ward 3 seat, what is the one thing you would do as a council member to help the 1 in 7 residents who currently live in poverty in our city?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to hear anything that you're not going to expect here, but for me, it's affordable housing. That is the number one thing, because if you do not have a place to live, you do not have access to education. You do not often have access to employment. So much of that is online these days. You don't have the ability to make your own food. It becomes very costly very quickly if you don't have a place to live. Store your belongings in a safe manner. There's so many things that that stem from having.
Yeah, no, and if I may, so like, what's the one specific thing that first day on the job?
I
What
have
is
to
it?
choose from my
Yeah.
list of. I mean, I think in my experience that, and I said this before, I would love for my first thing to be a broad sweep, but I do also understand that we are hemorrhaging with evictions that are ongoing, so I think that my first thing would be rental assistance. I think that people need to stay housed. I think that even if it's, not for forever, but for enough time to figure out a move to avoid an eviction judgment. As you all know, eviction judgments go on your record permanently. There's nothing to get those off. Anything that buys people a little bit more time to move their families in a way that makes sense for them and gives them a little bit of autonomy, I think that that's the thing. So I would go rental assistance, just from my personal experience of watching the need for that.
Yeah, thanks. Second question, as I stated before. So we heard the mayor talk today about one of his priorities being economic development among community and workforce development. There was a question in the survey about economic development. You answered that, but I'd like to pursue that a little further and just ask you, for you, how do you define economic development? What's the goal of good economic development at the city level, and what's the ideal role the city plays in promoting economic development?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of growth in Durham, and I do think that we all are aware that that growth is coming, and that also that growth is useful for the economy. But to me, we have to be able to sustain the growth, and so I think that the number one thing for a healthy economy is having a space available for that growth to happen in a way that makes sense, that supports the people already living here. We have to have the infrastructure for that growth. So I don't believe that you can have a functional economy where you're just catering to the needs of people who are coming in and developing and selling property and that sort of thing. There have to be, people in Durham have to have the ability to partake in the things that are going on in Durham. So a thriving economy to me is a place where everybody has the ability to engage.
Great, thank you. I'm just watching the clock here. My next question is, actually, I have a question for you in particular. Impressive resume, both professionally and in sort of education background, and amazing work you're doing with legal services. I'm just curious, or legal aid of North Carolina. I'm just curious, like outside of your profession, what's the ways you've served in the community, organizations, causes, or so forth? What kind of community engagement? You just mentioned that a little bit, but I'd be curious, just sort of, if you could elucidate that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, I have done volunteer work with local organizations and some local PACs in the area, and a lot of that has been voter turnout, and particularly around local elections, which I think is super important. And I've done a lot of door knocking, which is, as you all know, because you've probably done it for your own campaigns, like very time consuming. But a lot of the door knocking that I've loved the most has been just asking people in Durham what issues are important to them, which is a thing that I was able to do with Durham for All. We were literally just surveying people. What's going on? What are you feeling? And that has been a really awesome way to engage in the community and really like hear from people what's going on and what they'd like to see. I also pride myself in being a person in my social group who's constantly talking about the issues that are going on. So you will hear me having a really fun conversation at parties, which is about eviction at all times. But more importantly, I think that I'm trying to be out and about in the community, educating people around what's really going on in the housing crisis that we're facing, and what other people who are in different socioeconomic classes than themselves are really experiencing in the city.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and just try and be as succinct as possible, concise as possible. Well, tell me, what steps do you take to respect someone you may just dislike?
That I may dislike?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like I disagree with a lot of people. I'm not sure I dislike a lot of people, but I really feel like people have common ground that can be reached. I don't know that I've ever met somebody where we can't agree on anything. So for me, it's important to talk about that common ground and see if we can come around to other issues on that.
Good, thank you. Could you conceptualize your ideal city with 3 action steps that you take? So you're playing The Sims.
Yes. Everyone has a place to live. That is the number one for me. It's safe, and it is secure, and it is a place that is habitable. And I think that the second priority for me would be, I talked a little bit about this before, but community-led de-escalation. Instead of relying on systems that we have had for long periods of time that we have seen not work in the way that we want to. Like we definitely have a criminal legal system and a police force, but we don't see a reduction in crime due to those things. So having community accountability and methods for de-escalation, I think would be my second thing. And then the third thing would be education and like opportunities for education that aren't just in the classroom that cater to one specific style of learning, but the valuation of all types of education and skills and trades to allow people to contribute in the ways that they are most happy and able to do and feel fulfilled.
Great. And regarding that, I want to ask somewhat of a follow-up question / 2-part next question.
Okay.
Do you believe police are necessary? 1, and 2, as somewhat of a follow-up, do you see a difference in safety versus reducing crime?
Okay, great question. So whether the police are necessary, I am, like I said, I am a realistic person. I would like to say that I see a future where police as we know it is not a necessary factor, but in this exact moment, I think if we defunded the whole Durham police tomorrow, that would be a problem because we don't have any infrastructure built around any other alternatives. So whether or not they're necessary, I don't think in the long term that is, and I don't think that we have to think so in the box about it being necessary, but I do understand that for right now, that is the structure that we have. I'm sorry, could you say?
And the other was, do you see a differentiation between
Yes.
safety
and crime reduction? Yes. So
reducing crime?
this is coming from a person who's studied law, but what I'm going to say is that a lot of our crimes are made up. So yes, there is a difference. We have gone over and just broadly criminalized so many things and things that have been intentionally targeting certain communities, and there's no question about that when you look at like how criminal law has been written and the development of it over the years. So yes, there is a major difference. There are certain things that are crimes, which I don't feel maybe make us less safe, but I think that's sort of a legal creation. Safety to me is like you know your neighbors, and they're watching out for you, and you're watching out for them, and people have shared commitment to the community, and there's not a want to harm people around you. And that is, to me, the definition of safety, and I don't think that it maybe even has to be related to crime.
I appreciate that response. Thank you. Lastly, well, almost lastly, what factors do you consider when trying to support something that you may not necessarily? Actually, I'm not going to ask that because I think you answered it already when you talked about finding common ground. So, do you consider yourself a courageous person where you don't mind making people that you usually run with upset? Sometimes in politics, you have to make your friends upset.
Yes, yes. I mean, I practice in a very, a very contentious field, and I'm used to having people upset with me. But I'd like to think that that I'm able to foster some communication and respect among the people that I work with to overcome any of that disagreement.
Thank you. And just this is for just a process matter. We have meetings on Thursdays at 1 p.m. However, it is my responsibility to assign about 9 additional meetings to each person on this dais, which requires early morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. Does your schedule allow you to commit to that?
If I have prior knowledge, it does, and I also have had conversations about potentially cutting my time down if that was needed to be on the table. So if it is possible that I end up sitting on the diocese, then yes, I will be available, and I will ensure that I can serve the community in that capacity.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Appreciate it.
All right, next up we have Shelia Huggins. Welcome to City Hall, Ms. Huggins.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we will go into rotation of each member of the dais asking you or having dialogue with you for 5 minutes.
All right, great. Thank you for inviting me again, council members. Thank you for showing up this evening, people who are here in the room, and for those who may be watching on YouTube, Facebook, or whatever their social media platform of choice is. Thank you. I want to start by first just sort of talking about a theme before I jump into my background. I'm here because I care about Durham. I'm here because I care about the people who live here in Durham, the businesses that are in Durham, our institutions that are here. I know that there's been a lot of growth and a lot of concern about the direction of our city. And I know that people feel like maybe, where is the place for me? Is there still a place for me? How do I fit in? And this is why I'm here. I grew up in a family that's been long committed to political involvement, caring about what their community looks like. And I worked for the city for almost 9 years in 3 different departments. So I know about budgeting, I know about management, I know about working with people. I know what it takes when you have to work late to get a job done because guess what? Somebody's water doesn't work anymore, or you're calling 911 and you're waiting for someone to answer a little bit too long. So I care about the direction of this city. I believe that my experience as an attorney, my experience in the environmental field as an environmental chemist working for the state of North Carolina, I believe that my experience working just in the political arena and understanding the challenges that people still face every single day, that those are the experiences that I'm bringing to the table. Those are the experiences I want to take and help make our city the best that it can be for every single person that's here. And that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First up, we have Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor, it's good to see you. Happy New Year. Congratulations on getting this far in the process. The Durham City Council is the final arbiter of Durham's business. We're the fiduciaries of the city. And in that spirit, I want to ask you, do you have a particular economic worldview or theory that would inform your governance, one? And two, what would you be willing to raise taxes for?
Okay. Economic theory, look, I'm going to go back to one of the things that I talked about when I was running for office. And we talk a lot about people thriving in the city of Durham and people being able to have an affordable life here in the city of Durham. But you do not get that if you cannot find a job in this city or you do not have an income to pay for housing, to pay for transportation, to pay for food, to turn on lights. And people know the difference between saying, I need to get my light bill paid versus I need to go pay Duke Power or something like that. It matters a lot. And so to me, I think my main economic worldview is that we need to be doubling down on working with our employers that are here and the ones that are coming to make sure that our residents understand the skills, experience, the education that they need to be prepared, not just for the jobs of right now, but the jobs of tomorrow and the future. Look, I have a daughter who's graduating from college in just a few months. I have a nephew who just started his freshman year at North Carolina Central University. We are concerned as a family about what their outlook looks like and whether or not they might be able to live the life that they want to live. So when we talk about what my economic global theme is, it is about making sure that people are not just self-sufficient, but people are thriving and that people are stable, not just now, but in the future. Now, when it comes to raising taxes, I'm that person that says, what are our needs? We look to our community and determine what our community needs are. We look to our employees because they carry out everything that needs to get done for the city. And if we are not taking care of both of those, then we're not doing our job. And that means that sometimes we have to make the hard choices to be able to say when, where, and how we're going to be raising taxes, if necessary.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One of the terms that's much bandied about in our public square is gentrification.
I'm sorry?
Gentrification.
Yes.
And we do a lot of land use cases, a little bit, on the Durham City Council. I want to ask what your views are on combating gentrification, if in fact you think gentrification is a bad thing, and what specific powers do you think you will wield as a council member to combat gentrification, if it needs to be combated?
Like a lot of you, I went back home and visited my family during the holidays, and I have had a history of taking pictures and video. And this particular time, as I was leaving the neighborhood, there was a tract of land that had for a long time been vacant. And now it looks just like some of the tracts of land here, where you see the modern houses. And you know the rents that are associated with those houses are not necessarily rents that are affordable to people who live in that neighborhood. When I go home to Greenville, which is where I'm from, and I stand on the front porch, I know a lot of the people who have lived in that neighborhood, and they're mostly single-family homes with apartments behind us. But what you don't know is they're mobile homes across the street. This is a dire situation that's not just happening in Durham, it's happening everywhere. And so there are changes that are taking place, and yes, people who live in their communities are finding it harder and harder and harder to be able to stay in those communities. And so I think, again, it comes down to making sure that every single family is economically stable, and that we make sure that to the extent that we can, we have policies and programs in place that help them stay in their homes. So one of the things we've done here is what? Have our low-income tax property assistance program. So those people who are really in dire straits can get funds to help pay for their property taxes. That's one way of helping them stay in their homes. We've had our guaranteed income program. And look, we're going to run into a lot of challenges to try to figure out how we're going to pay for some of these programs so that we can have people stay in their homes. But I'm a firm believer that we get behind making sure that people have good jobs, that they're stable, and that they can be in a home where they can grow, be safe, and take care of their families.
With the final few seconds, if you just take a couple of seconds to talk about what we can do concretely and through policy to combat gun violence.
Stable families, stable homes, making sure that especially our young people have access to opportunities. My father was on the Greenville City Council for almost 6 terms. And one of the things that he really pushed, was making sure that there were opportunities for the young people. Before he was elected to City Council, he served on Greenville Parks and Recreation. We had a pool put up not far from where I lived. We had the government there, the city, donating money to the Jackie Robinson League so that they were mostly boys, so that young boys could play baseball. Those were the kinds of things that I learned growing up that you did in a community to help keep children interested in activities and having things to do. I just had this conversation with my daughter today, and she said the last thing you want is a bunch of young kids running around without anything to do.
Thank you, Councilor. It's been an honor speaking to you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Baker.
Hey, Sheila, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
So my question is, as you navigate Durham, as you get around, whether you're driving or running or taking your bike, and then as you think a little bit about the urban design of the new areas that we're building in Durham, what do you think is going well and what do you think is not going well and needs to be improved?
We've got some challenges here. Some of them are not new challenges, and I'll just tell you, when my husband and daughter and I moved to Durham and we were looking for a place to stay, one of the things at the top of the list was it had to be a place where we could walk out the door and live our lives. Okay, so I'm a runner, walker. I want that kind of neighborhood. My husband rides his bike every single day. He's better than I am because I don't run in the rain and the snow, but he does. But here's the thing, we lived in an older neighborhood, great in terms of trees and parks, but very few sidewalks, so not entirely safe. Recently, I had the opportunity to drive down Alston Avenue and watch school children get off the bus. There were no sidewalks on Alston Avenue. And when you look now, there are now sidewalks down one side of the street, which is great, but it's not the side that they were getting off of the school bus. And so we have to look at making sure that we are looking at infrastructure and saying, hey, here's how much we have to spend, where are the places that it's needed the most, and making sure we're sort of checking those boxes. So I think in my own personal mind, I think we've got a long way to go. And I understand that we do have plans in place for some of these. I live near Hillendale Road, and we have had a plan in place for a while for what that should look like when it comes to putting sidewalks there. And I'm telling you, we have lost, and you know, we have lost people on Guest Road, on Hillendale Road, because we do not have the infrastructure in order to keep people safe. So along with sort of a holistic view in terms of what transportation looks like, I think a major part of that, a priority, has to be the focus on making sure that our residents are safe.
Thank you. What are your top priorities for affordable housing?
I wish everybody could have an affordable house. So I'm going to go back to when I was running for office, and one of the things I talked about was my plan called the 60th, because last year was the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And I think a lot of times people think about the civil rights part, but they don't really hone in on the fact that jobs were an important factor there. And not just jobs, but safe jobs, because that was an issue too. But then also the freedom aspect, the aspect of being free from illegal discrimination and the legacies of that. And so when I look at affordable housing, I really do go back to the basics of saying that there is no home that's affordable if you cannot find a job to pay for it or you do not have an income. And so we really have to go back to the basics here. I don't know many people at all that can go out and get a house without a job or an income. I just don't know them. We have got to do a better job of saying to some of our residents, what are the skills, experience, and training that they need to get them on a path to be able to afford what housing is going to cost. And then there are always going to be these places where government is going to have to step in and do its part also. And part of that includes putting policies in place when we're working with rezonings to say, hey, we'd rather see units versus donations of money. We would rather see that. and then sort of understanding what the additional programs are to make sure that we're supporting our residents too. But really and truly, I'm always going to start with making sure that people have got the money and that they're stable and can get in the house, can afford the transportation to get to the job, the food, afford the internet, and everything that comes with those set of needs.
Thank you. What are some leaders you look up to?
Look, so this sounds a little weird, okay? But I'm going to go back to Silence of the Lambs, that part where they talk about, the part where he talks about what you see every day, because it matters, what you see every day. What I saw every day were two parents who worked as hard as they could to make their community the best that it could be.
Thank you so much.
Did not know where you were going with that.
I thought you were going to say Hannibal Lecter, right?
That's what I was
Silence
thinking,
of the
too.
Lambs, yes.
Wow, all right. Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Good to see you, Sheila. I sent my question earlier, so that gave you some time to study. The question is, City Council spends a large portion of its time on zoning, and it is an important part of our job as council members. Over the last 2 years, can you tell me about a zoning case where you agreed with council's decision, where we got it right and why, and then the opposite about a zoning case where you disagreed with council's decision, where we got it wrong and why?
Great, and thank you for sending that earlier. I love the opportunity to do a little bit of research here. And I want to talk specifically first about the Bragtown Industrial Business Park. And I actually took some notes here because I want to make sure I cover a few things. One of the first things that I want to highlight with that is this part about taking underutilized property and property that we haven't necessarily identified what the future is going to look like. This was zoned as light industrial. And so now we have the opportunity to have manufacturing, to have healthcare, high-tech jobs, all of this to come into this area. And again, the piece that's missing here is, what is the jobs component going to look like? So for me, I see this as a big opportunity for the residents of this city to, again, connect with employers, connect with the business park, to say, okay, here's an opportunity for our residents to now get jobs and grow. This particular development, let me highlight just a couple of things and put on my glasses. So one of the pieces that came up with this had been a brownfield site, meaning there were some concerns about whether or not there was environmental contamination, underutilization of the site. I actually worked for, it's called now the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, but I worked in the Division of Waste Management. And so I understand the background about having contamination on sites and the amount of money that it takes to redevelop that type of property and the timeline and other resources. Right here in the city of Durham, I don't know if any of you recall this, but when DPAC was under development, there was a moment in time where there was soil that was found on that site that was contaminated, and it had been taken to a construction and debris landfill. Well, a construction and debris landfill is not where you're going to be taking contaminated soil. And so when you think about different properties across the city, other brownfield sites, other sites that are unutilized, and the idea of being able to come together as a council, as a planning commission, and say, this is one of those sites that we're going to support in terms of what redevelopment looks like at a commercial level, in terms of industrial development and that sort of thing. So I think that this is the direction that we need to be going and taking a look at all of our properties like this and figuring out where are there more opportunities like this in terms of how Durham can grow. All right, so on the other side, this is not one that I necessarily would have voted down, but I do feel like it was a lost opportunity here, and that was South Point. As I said earlier, when we can have units for affordable housing, that is a great thing, okay? On the other hand, with this particular site, we know that we're talking about a possible hotel with, I think, up to 200 hotel rooms. We're talking about office space, maybe medical office space. We're talking about additional retail. And I think one of the main issues that came up with this site was, how do we continue to expand this in a way that meets the needs of the market so that we don't wind up having something that looks like the demise of Cary Town Center. And I used to shop at Cary Town Center, so I remember what it used to be. And so there is a concern about how we say to developers when we're rezoning, how do we get to the point where we're having units for affordable housing and not just money? So I'm all for the jobs. I'm all for the number of contracts that our local businesses got and received, because I think that's very important. I think it has to be a priority as often as we can make it. I just feel like this was one of those instances where I wish we could have had some units developed.
Thank you. I appreciate those responses. Oh, I don't have time. Okay. The second part of the second question I have is, what do you think we could do to support our immigrant and refugee communities in Durham?
Right.
Just for the record, this is Councilmember Ritz's fault. He asked a question at the last minute, so we allowed the first candidate to go, and that has been so on, so you can answer the question.
Right. So I think one of the things that we have to do whenever we're talking about another community is to go to them first and see what their needs are. I'm never going to be the person to try to dictate to someone else what I think their needs are. We have a lot of public and private organizations right here in Durham that are doing great work. So I think that is the first place that we start. Ask them what their needs are. Second, as a city, we determine where do we fit in with helping those needs get met. Are there gaps in funding, resources, opportunities that we have in the city that we can use to then say, here's a way that we can help our immigrant communities that are coming here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you this evening. I think I just have to ask this one question, just because your history, your background. Can you say or explain very briefly what happens if you burn the soil in those brownfield sites rather than removing it to landfills? What's the difference? And I guess whether or not it's possible, or would it be a viable solution?
I do not know. I have not kept up
It's okay.
with that level
It was just something, the background in the environmental science, I just had to ask. So let me just regularly just ask you. I know that when I first ran in 2017, you ran as well. I know that this council has seen a lot. Is there anything in particular about where we are today that you think would have been different if you had won that race?
That is a very interesting question.
I didn't ask myself.
Yeah, there would be a lot different because, of course, Leonardo wouldn't have won. So the makeup would be entirely different, I think. I think, though.
I mean, like you would have stayed the full 4 years?
Well.
Hey, leave me out of this.
I think opportunities come up and people find the pathway for them. And I think it's important. I've always said this to people. I will never tell someone what they should or shouldn't do when it comes to running for office. I think you have to have those conversations with yourself and with your God and with your family to determine what that looks like. In terms of me being on this board, of course, I think the city government experience would have brought something to the table. I also think that the legal training, we have a number of people who have legal backgrounds who are also candidates for this position. I think there is something to be said for that. When you throw in the science background that I have, and I have a BS in biological sciences with a minor in genetics and a specialization in microbiology, I can be almost too analytical sometimes and too science and data driven. And so for me, that is usually where I start. I then supplement that with anecdotal evidence that comes from the relationships that you have with people. And that is the component of that that I think helps direct my decision-making.
Thank you. And just tracking back, love to hear your thoughts on, I know that you actually shared like a plan around what you would do around racial equity. And I guess I guess moving forward into that, how would you implement that plan?
I'm sorry, say again now?
Your plan for racial equity on the council or in the city?
So I think, are you talking about the plan for the 60th or? 'cause
I'm
that
sorry,
was
I'm talking
housing.
about it was one of the questionnaire answers. You had like a 7-point process or 7-point areas. Am I reading the wrong one? Nope, you were the only African-American. It is you. I think it's answer number, I can read a little bit of it to jog your memory if that helps. But you mentioned, hold on, 7 points, it was pushing back against the legislation that does not support our values, that curtails and eliminates the rights of city residents. Is that helping?
All right, a little bit.
I know it was before the holidays.
So here's the thing, yeah. And I spoke a little bit about the legal background. So one of the courses that I took when I was in law school was civil rights litigation. And understanding the laws that we have in place that, have sort of burdened the movement of people in terms of how they have successful livelihoods, And I think part of that means that we do go back and we take a look at our policies and procedures for number one, in terms of what those look like. Are they falling down the same path? And a lot of times we tend to operate within our own lens. And so I think sometimes that means bringing in other people and listening to them. But the other side of that does mean that when we're talking about taking care of, especially our residents and our employees, that we make sure that we are understanding the impact of illegal discrimination and how that has impacted where people are now and their opportunities for where they're going in the future. And I'll just say this one thing because I think we're out of time. The highest number of people who are showing up now in terms of education and going to university at that level is women, and particularly Black women. And yet the people who also are more likely to be impoverished and to carry high student loan burdens are those very same women. And so when we talk about things like, especially at the federal level, when we talk about things like financial aid and who's getting that and the burden that it places on them. And so part of it is looking at, and again, that's the federal level. Part of that is understanding the systematic policies that are in place that impact what race equity looks like. But then we also have to do that on the local level also.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Councilmember Rist.
Thank you. Ms. Huggins, good to see you again. Congratulations on coming this far, and it was a pleasure serving with you, or not serving, but being with you on the campaign trail, so great to see you. I'm going to start with a question I sent you by email today. Oh. So if chosen to serve Ward 3, what is the one thing you would do as a council member to help the 1 in 7 residents who currently live in poverty in this city?
I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here. If you go back and look at my questionnaire when I ran, the first question that was asked on the PA questionnaire, I mentioned poverty. If you go back and look at the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, it doesn't take you much further along before I mentioned poverty. I didn't just start talking about poverty today. I was talking about poverty when I ran. I was talking about poverty when I ran in 2017, and you can go back and pull that up. And I say this, and I will continue to say this. You cannot live in this society if you do not have a stable income. And so when we talk about poverty, we have to talk about the pathway, the complete pathway that gets people not just to this point where they're making it, but this point where they're actually thriving. And so yes, 1 in 7, 13, 14%, it's really not the number that we're talking about, because we know that there's so many more people who are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being a part of that 1 in 7. And so we have to do a better job of saying, what is the roadmap for people to have a more stable environment? And part of that has to do with education, making sure that we are working well with our educational institutions like Durham Tech, Durham Public School Systems, NCCU, and Duke, and what their role is in making sure that those educational opportunities are available to our residents. And then also we're talking about training programs. Look, I worked in the Office of Economic and Workforce Development for a little while. I can tell you, I think they're understaffed. I think they're under-resourced. If you want to talk about getting people jobs and making Durham better, then you have to support the very department that's out there to do this for our residents. And so when we talk about poverty, I think there are a lot of spokes in the wheel, because I got that science and diversity background. There is no one tool that is going to check the box for us. There are a lot of tools, there are resources, we need a good budget, and we need a timeline. And that's how we impact poverty. And we don't do it alone. We have faith institutions. We have other organizations that are working on job training. They're working on mentoring for our youth. We have a program right here within the city that helps youth get jobs. That is a starting point for so many youth.
So let's talk more about economic development. Tell me, and there was a question about this on the survey, or the questionnaire. Tell me, what's the goal of economic development? And what is the role, the proper role the city can play? I mean, you've worked at OEWD, right? So what's the proper role the city should play in healthy economic development in a city like Durham?
So there's the governance piece, okay? Making sure that we have solid infrastructure in place, making sure that we have a safe community here, making sure that we have the government boxes ticked off. So for instance, when the business wants to come, they know that their employees can call 911 and someone will answer. And so the government side of that needs to be our first priority. What are our responsibilities? And so we check that box off first. The other part of that too is where I think we sort of could do a better job is making sure that we're developing good relationships with companies that are here and those that are coming here. And so part of what we really have to be focused on is making sure that we have a really strong tax base here, making sure that we have good companies that are coming and providing jobs that pay fair wages, jobs that treat our residents with respect, and jobs that not just provide them with just an entry-level job, but an opportunity for career growth. And that's another piece that the city can take on too. So for instance, if you go to the city's website, you can find out about jobs, you can find a little bit about benefits, but where is the part where the city employee goes, you know what? I'm at accountant level 1 or budget analyst 1. What does my pathway look like to get to budget analyst 3 or assistant director? Where is that? And so there's some pieces that the city can do also in terms of making sure at sort of the micro level in terms of employees that they're a little bit more economically stable. But there, I think there's an current to sort of make sure that we're bringing good businesses to Durham, that we make sure that we're letting the world know how great we are. And the world didn't used to think we were that great, and then they found out the secret, and now everybody wants to come. But, you know, we need to have high expectations. We need to hold people up, hold businesses up, and hold them accountable for having good and great jobs for our residents.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and I'll take the last round here. Thank you again for being here, Attorney Huggins. So, I was inspired to change this question by a previous candidate. You just start off with, tell me what psychological steps do you take to respect someone that you disagree with? The original question was dislike. That's about personality. We don't want to focus on that. We want to talk about policy. So someone that you may disagree with. And thank you. I think it was Ms. Cook.
So, at one point in time, I had a teenage daughter. We didn't always agree on everything. It requires some work and commitment. But really and truly, it's all about communication and respect and how you talk to people and how you treat people. And not just what you do out in public, but behind closed doors, so that people don't ever feel like you don't value them as a human being. I spoke earlier about my father being on the city council for a number of years. I have 2 younger sisters, so he was in a household with my mother and 3 young girls. And he used to sometimes call us water bears because we would cry about things. And one of the things that he would say, though, as he was out in the world doing his job as a city council member was, you have to learn how to disagree with people without getting upset about it. Now, I know a lot of times we get passionate about things. I get very passionate about some things. But there's a way that you speak to people, and there's a way that you communicate to people, and it's simply with respect.
Thank you. And I'll ask that we can be as succinct as possible, so I want to get all these questions out. Could you conceptualize your ideal city with 3 steps that you would take? Three actionable policy steps.
3 actual policy steps. So I think, again, the first one would have to be making sure that we have a strong and vibrant economy, okay? We don't have taxes. We can't pay for anything if we don't have that in place. So that would be number 1, making sure we're attracting good businesses, keeping good businesses, and making sure that our residents are getting those jobs. The second thing is making sure that it's a place that our people want to live in, okay? That involves everything from having good parks systems, having opportunities for our youth, having places for our families to go and enjoy arts and entertainment, and just things to do, making it a good city. And then the third piece is making it a place where everyone feels welcome and safe. And that can look like a lot of different things, but those are the 3 things that I would focus on.
Thank you. What would you consider public safety solutions, like immediate, long-term, midterm?
Okay. Councilmember Freeman brought up the 2017 race, and at that time, Farad Ali was running for office. And one of the things he used to talk about when he talked about crime was the fact that, children they aren't born and they don't grow up and go to kindergarten thinking that what I really want to do is to engage in a life of crime. What that really means is that we as adults have usually dropped the ball on some things. And so it's up to us to make sure that we have policies in place, procedures in place. And I talk about things like opportunities. I talk about making sure that we're coordinating with our public school system, making sure that families are more stable. Families that are stable, families that aren't worried about income, that aren't worried about feeding their children, have children that then go to school not worried about being hungry and not worried about not being safe. And so part of that, again, goes back to making sure that the home environment is the best environment for our youth, and it really starts with them. So short-term and long-term, I think, wrapped up together.
All right, I'm going to ask this before 0-0. What factors do you consider when trying to support something that you may disagree with initially?
Well, I'd want to know what I'm missing. I think we all come to the table with our own backgrounds, our own experiences, our own perspectives. And one of the things that I have found that helps me the most is to be in a room full of people that have different perspectives and different views. Because what happens is I become more informed in my decision-making process. And I'll just be honest, I have been in a number of rooms where people don't necessarily look like me, they don't necessarily come from the same background, and I have listened to some of those experiences, and it has heightened my understanding. And so one of the very first things I want to know is, what am I missing? Tell me how my decision-making skills, the data that I'm taking in and those anecdotal stories that I'm hearing from residents, what piece am I missing? Because I haven't lived everybody's life. I haven't walked in everybody's shoes.
Thank you so much. And lastly, this is a general process question. We meet on Thursdays at 1 p.m. I'm responsible for, we meet on Thursdays at 1 p.m. However, I have to assign committees to everybody on here, and we usually split it up to about 9 committees or so. Those are 9 additional meetings in addition to the 4 council meetings that we have a month, every first and third Monday night, and every first and third Thursday at 1 p.m. This means it's early morning to noon to afternoon to evening. Does your schedule allow you to be able to participate in what is generally an inequitable government participation?
Yes, I work for myself, so I have a little bit more flexibility with that. I understand that that is an aspect of the job.
All right. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And next up, we have Madam Clerk, are we doing closed caption? Do you recommend us taking a break for any type of accessibility support? If so, I'd rather do that now before. Okay, thank you. We'll take a quick break.
Yes, I would suggest a quick recess.
Yeah, we'll take a quick break. Mr. Swain, could you come to the dais, please? Could you pronounce your? Just 5. Let's take 5. Well, we have 1 restroom, so let's take 5 minutes. I know y'all will take 10. So 5 minutes, and let's get back on. So, yeah, let's be back and start at 9.
Meet the needs of the city in a variety of different ways, right? When you think about the work that attorneys do, oftentimes it's specialized, by practice, right? So you might take a bankruptcy attorney who does bankruptcy work for numbers of different clients. On the other hand, the city attorney's office has one client, just a town or city, and we do all of the different things that that town or city might need from a legal perspective.
Everyone in Durham should be able to find a home they can afford. That's why Forever Home Durham is creating affordable, livable, and inclusive communities for low to middle income residents. From renting to owning, find out how the city is helping more people find homes right here in Durham. Learn more at foreverhomedurham.com.
There's no place like home. Home is where the heart is.
Hey, can I help you? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
It is our place of safety and warmth. Home is where love resides, memories are created, and laughter warms the heart. That's why the Durham Human Relations Division is committed to enforcing the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits unlawful discrimination based on race, color, disability, religion, sex, familial status, or national origin.
Here's some tips to ensure that your garbage and recycling gets picked up. 1. Your carts should be put out for collection before 6 a.m. on your collection day. 2. Your carts should be at least 3 feet from all other objects such as mailboxes, telephone poles, fire hydrants, trees, and other carts. 3. Your carts should be no more than 3 feet from the curb. 4. No vehicles should be blocking your carts. The mechanical arms on our trucks need direct access to your carts and cannot reach around vehicles. To find more information about garbage and recycling pickups, go to this web address.
That came quicker than I expected. All right, so we have Chastan, Swain. Thank you for being here tonight. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we will begin the rotation of each council member asking you a series of questions and dialoguing with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. My name is Chastan Swain. I have been a lifelong North Carolinian. I grew up on a tobacco
Chill
farm.
one moment, please. Is that mic on?
Hello?
Oh, there we go. So
Closer?
you may need to speak into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Could you reset the clock, please?
There we go. Does that work better?
That's much better. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
can
for
start
catching
again.
Okay. My name is Chastan Swain. I've been a lifelong North Carolinian. I was born and raised on a tobacco farm about an hour and a half west of here. My background before law was in ceramics. I attended Appalachian State University, pursued a BFA before going to Penn State for the same. I was brought back to North Carolina to pursue a JD at UNC, and that was driven a lot by a passion for conservation and the environment. I had taken a semester off during college to through hike the AT, and that, along with the community that I was raised with on the tobacco farm that I grew up on, has been foundational in, I think, who I am and what I care about. Once in Durham, my partner and I moved here while I was still in law school, and have called Durham home ever since. Since I graduated from law school, I have worked for the state in a various capacity, both from DHHS to OSBM and DNCR. So Health and Human Services, State Budget Management, and then Natural and Cultural Resources. It's always like an alphabet soup. But it's underscored my passion for public service. And as I've developed that through state government, I've also grown to love the city. And so that's why I applied. I love to call here home with my husband and my dog. We love to walk to Isaac's Bagels to grab breakfast. We love to be in a community that feels diverse and that accepts us. And we love to see one that has a little bit of grit and tenacity, because I think those embody some of the ideals that I hold dear. And I really appreciate the time that you've given me.
Thank you so much. At this time, we will move into each council member asking a series of questions. We will start with Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor, good evening. It's a pleasure to meet you and to speak with you tonight. Congratulations on getting this far in the process. That's no small achievement. So the Durham City Council is the final arbiter of Durham city business. We're also fiduciaries of the city. So in that spirit, I want to ask you, do you have a particular economic worldview or philosophy or theory that would inform your governance decisions on the council, one? And two, what would you be willing to raise taxes for?
Okay. So I do not have a particular economic theory that I particularly ascribe to. I think what drives my considerations around economic choices is, and in the scope of a community, is how the community is investing in its citizens. So looking for a city that is really going to invest and support the people who are here, because we find that for communities that invest in their citizens, those citizens invest back into the community. And as great as Durham is for attracting new businesses and new people, I think making sure that the people who are here are well supported, whether it's their entrepreneurial spirit, their cultural identities, and then just their day-to-day well-being, so ensuring that they have what they need to thrive in Durham. The second part of your question was pertaining to...
What you would raise taxes for?
To raising taxes. I think that is one of the hardest questions that council's going to consider at any given point. Raising taxes, I think, would require a deep consideration of whether or not the impact of the increase would have an outsized impact on the citizens proportionate to the services that those taxes would go to. I think that right now, city staff, they do a wonderful job, but ensuring that the government in Durham has enough funds to support the staff that we have now, and also to expand programs is something that would probably be pretty central to any tax increase considerations.
Thank you for that. Speaking of supporting folk that are already here, one of the terms you'll hear bandied about in our public square quite a bit is gentrification. So when I ask, what are your views on gentrification? And if you see gentrification as a negative, a bad thing, what particular powers do you think you would have as a council member individually and this council collectively would have to combat gentrification?
Yeah, I see gentrification as being a massive challenge for the city, and not just one that we face today, but one that Durham has faced for generations. Looking back to projects like 147, which cut off downtown from the Hayti community and the Fayetteville Street corridor, those things were intentional, and they've created seismic shifts in the prosperity and the well-being of communities. Presently, we're facing kind of another period where we're looking at development that's pushing out communities. I think that the biggest tool, or one of the best tools that I see council leveraging, is the Unified Development Ordinance, and I know that y'all recently passed a new comprehensive plan, but the UDO gives you that teeth to really control development, thinking about ways to create communities that when they have growth, it's reflective of what's already there, so potentially looking at having size limitations on new dwellings or certain dwelling types. I think those things are ways that you could shape the inputs to gentrification. The one other piece that I'll note is that I think gentrification is also cultural, and so investing in institutions that support the cultural background of communities, because if you have houses coming in or businesses coming in that displace communities, you're not only losing those homes or the other businesses, you're also losing kind of those cultural identities. I work in local governments across the state right now, and one of the biggest pieces of pride and energy and history is that cultural identity, and so we're looking at how to preserve that too, I think is a huge piece of the gentrification conversation.
Thank you for that response. Gun violence is in the news almost daily for the country and for our city as well. As a council member, what would be your recommended comprehensive approach with some specifics as to how we can combat gun violence?
So I've had a personal relationship with gun violence. I've had several family members who have experienced some great tragedy related to gun violence, and I don't know if there's a singular answer or a comprehensive plan. I think that there are a lot of steps that the council can take to reduce gun violence, and I think most of what I lean towards is more long-term, which is education-based and community-based. I think giving community members alternatives into opportunities and education that will pull you away from of crime or of the use of guns in general, I think is critical. And so I think that investing in green space and community centers and better educational outcomes at a young age should have a dramatic improvement in the gun violence epidemic that Durham's experiencing, because our city is definitely not trending in the same way that the country is right now, and that's a concern.
It's been an honor speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Hey, Chastan, thanks for being here. It's good to see you. So my first question is, when you observe the way that the city is growing and changing from an urban design perspective, both parts of the city that already exist as well as the outskirts of the city and the way that we're suburbanizing, what do you think that we're doing well, and what do you think we're not doing well and needs to be improved?
So on the doing well part, I think really increasing density in the urban core has been an essential step that is needed, both to address some of the housing needs in the city, but then also creating kind of a nexus for the infrastructure of transportation that will kind of support a broader growing city. Something that I see that Durham has invested in are kind of the little nodes of downtowns around the downtown core. So thinking about Old Five Points, Old East Durham on Anger, 9th Street, the Chapel Hill corridor, those areas I think are getting incentivized for development in a positive way. And I think that'll kind of help create a network for transportation. Some of the things that I've been a little dismayed to see is the rapid development of ex-urban areas around the exterior of Durham. So again, growing up in a rural area, I think that those places have as much character and integrity as urban sites, and creating a development plan that both benefits those communities and the city, I think is something that maybe has fallen to the wayside recently. And recently may be a stretch. I think the past generation may have been an issue. And seeing the impacts specifically of those developments on some of the watersheds around Durham is extremely concerning.
Thank you for those answers. What are your top priorities for affordable housing?
So something that I touched on in my responses to the questionnaire, and I'll admit that I'm like a closet planner. I don't have any formal background. I took some classes while at law school in urban planning and design, and I really enjoy land use. So this is all speaking from somewhat of an amateur perspective, but I have seen examples and best practices come out of cities like Toronto where they're taking infill and doing affordable housing on a small scale. And while those things do not address the wide need for affordable housing in the city, I do think that those are some of the more nimble and creative ways that the city could potentially address both the property that it has and can leverage, and then also creating affordable housing on a small scale that will have kind of mixed income within neighborhoods, which has been shown to be really beneficial.
Thank you. What are leaders that inspire you?
There are a lot. I live in the Moorhead Hill neighborhood, and just around the back of the block from me is Polly Murray's house. I think Polly is a huge inspiration because they existed at the intersect of several different communities, being a queer person, being a person of faith, and then also someone who advocated for social change. I think that's a huge inspiration. And it's immensely cool to be so close to historical trailblazers like home. I also think the current Congressman Jeff Jackson in the Charlotte area provides a really good roadmap of how to communicate with younger individuals especially. So I'm a millennial, and I see Gen Z coming into their space as adults and figuring out how to make politics and the way the world works accessible to them, I think is extremely critical. So I think that's another one.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker. Councilmember Caballero.
Hi, good evening. Good to see you. I sent my question earlier in email. Question is, City Council spends a large portion of its time on zoning and is an important part of our job as City Council members. Over the last 2 years, can you tell me about a zoning case where you agreed with Council's decision, where we got it right and why, and then about a zoning case you disagreed with, where we got it wrong and why?
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful changes recently would be rolling back the parking mandates for new builds in Durham. I think that'll be monumental both to the development of downtown, but then also to the preservation of some existing structures. I also think that when you remove parking, not only do you enhance the development, but you entice better public transportation. If someone can't have 400 parking spaces to park, they're more likely to take a bike or take a train or a bus. And so those types of multimodal corridors, I think, will naturally be enhanced by rolling back the parking requirements. A case that I think the council may have made the wrong decision on. I think moving forward right now with the Perry Farm tract and along Lick Creek is a very concerning move because I think it's exacerbating a lot of impacts that are being felt right now, both in those communities with the massive amount of development and the lack of infrastructure to support them, but then also from an environmental standpoint, the impacts that it's going to have on Falls Lake, which are already at peak levels, is going to be interesting. And I know that the developer has offered a lot of concessions in the way of buffers, but the reality is that right now the city and the environment don't really have the infrastructure to support that type of development there.
Thank you. My next question is, what do you think we can do to support our immigrant and refugee communities in Durham?
So this is speaking anecdotally, but my neighborhood listserv actually has provided a ton of support and intentional relief for communities that are coming into Durham. And I see communities of faith and nonprofits being great partners with the city on that space. The other piece that I think is essential, and this is something that I do in my work at Hometown Strong, is assessing how outreach creates accessibility or accessibility barriers for different communities. So I think Durham does an excellent job with creating bilingual outreach, but looking at what other languages beyond English and Spanish would be most helpful to the community. And then also not just accessibility or language within outreach, but actually getting the information about the services the city provides to those communities as they come in. I can only imagine that coming to a new community in a different country would be extremely jarring from day one, and that those first 60 days or 90 days are extremely critical, both from a mental and a physical perspective, and a financial perspective. So providing them the information they need to be successful from day one, I think, is essential.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up, we have Councilmember Freeman.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to meet you this evening. And I just have a couple questions. Hold on. I did want to ask the first question, noting that you had a dog. I just wanted to know what type of dog.
She's a Vizsla, and I never anticipated being so in love with a pet or enamored, but she's definitely in my world.
Okay. And then just understanding, the way that inclusion and racial equity works, I can appreciate you sharing your story in that as well. Is there anything in addition to that that you would like to share around inclusion and racial equity?
Yeah. So growing up on a tobacco farm in rural Forsyth County, there was not a ton of racial diversity. And that's one of the things that I think is really wonderful about Durham. I love to get to know people on a very deep level and get to understand their backgrounds. And when we discuss racial equity, it's really questions of accessibility. Does everyone have access to the same spaces, whether it is sitting on this dais or having the opportunity to have equal treatment in employment or equal treatment in housing and access to housing. And it's also support. So as an institution, does the city provide services and infrastructure to support people across the city from different racial backgrounds? I think those two pieces, the accessibility piece and then the support piece, are critical.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I don't think I had another question. I just want to check. Of course, and then just tracking back, I am a foodie, so if there are suggestions that you have for places you like to eat, maybe 1, 2, or 3,
Yeah.
just go for it.
That's the hardest question I think you give me tonight because I too am a foodie. I am completely enamored by Isaac's Bagels. It recently opened up on Chapel Hill Street. It's 2 blocks from me, and I get to walk up there, and they practically know my order at this point. But then I would also encourage you to take a quick jaunt down to Saltbox, have some delicious seafood, and top it all off with some ice cream at Two Roosters. It is absolutely delicious, and I go and embarrass them out.
Ice cream spot.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. I don't think I can compete with those questions or those answers, so I'll apologize for the mundane nature of my questions. You've heard me before. I actually have to just say congratulations on making it this far through the process.
Thank you.
It's a big accomplishment, and it's nice to meet you. My first question, as you've heard before, is if chosen for the Ward 3 seat, what is the one thing you would do as a council member, like your day one on council, to address the 1 in 7 people in Durham that live in poverty?
That's a huge question and a huge issue. I would target workforce development. So I have had the opportunity to work with the North Carolina Business Committee for Education for the past couple of years, and a large focus of our work has been looking at how to create better opportunities for students, to make them both aware of the opportunities they have in the workforce, and then also to prepare them by giving them the skill sets that they have. And Durham Public Schools has actually been a partner in this work, and they've had tremendous outcomes, to the point that I think that there are even some former students who have participated in these programs who have been hired on by the Durham Public Schools. So looking at it's a long-term goal, but looking at it from middle school and high school, it's like, how can you make sure that each student knows the job opportunities out there, and then they have the skill sets to achieve those. And then I think too, that a piece of that workforce development is finding mentoring businesses, and Durham is full of amazing businesses. And it's time for them to put a little bit of skin in the game and really get involved. And the ones that I have seen engaged in this get extremely excited about the opportunity to both introduce their industry to young people, and then also know that they're kind of pulling homegrown talent into those businesses.
Appreciate that. Continuing on that sort of vein, now let's look on the economic development side. So there was a question on the interview form about economic development. Why don't you say more about how you would define economic development? What's the goal of economic development in Durham? And what's the proper role that the city of Durham plays in promoting good economic development here?
I mean, economic development is all about prosperity, and so you're seeking to improve the prosperity outcomes of your community. But I think I favor a community development approach. So looking at ways that you can improve the community that also have positive economic development outcomes, supporting small businesses, ensuring that communities have the resources to workshop businesses and organizations, and again, that workforce training from school to employment. I think those are all really critical. And going back to a previous answer from early in the night too, I think when you create strong communities, the people really want to invest in them. And so I think we've seen that with different models across the country with like Teach for America. It's here in North Carolina in the government space from LF&C. And so looking to expand that throughout different industries. I've had personal experience working with local governments to try to figure out how to build out a pipeline in water treatment or in finance to make some of these jobs that people aren't really aware of more attractive.
Great, thank you. My next question is, I mean, you've got an amazing resume, super talented, and a strong background. You've, since you've been in Durham, you've jumped into the community. You've been involved in Ellerby Creek Watershed Association, Environmental Affairs Board. I'm just wondering, like, what's the long-term commitment to Durham?
It's funny. So my husband's from the mountains, and I'm from Forsyth County. And when we moved to Durham, I made him promise me that we would move to the mountains in 5 years. And that's completely been upended because I've fallen in love with Durham, and he has too. I will continue. I think I feel a personal obligation to the community that I'm in, and that goes back to growing up on a tobacco farm with an extended family close by and a church family. I don't really feel comfortable not investing in the space that I'm in, and I consistently want to grow roots. My background or passions are both in fine art and the environment, and so as soon as I moved to Durham, I had a friend call and say, hey, there's this organization called EQUA that does environmental conservation, and it was in an urban area, and that was something I'd never done. I'd worked in conservation spaces in rural areas. And then that's snowballed into looking at how EQUA, which is a wonderful environmental conservation group, can also outfit and equip other community members and organizations to kind of take ownership of their own spaces. So working with the Merrick Moore community and the environmental subdivision that they fought for and won, and then understanding what that process looks like long term, I think the involvement just snowballs, and that's kind of how I think I'll end up staying in Durham maybe forever.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, council members, and thank you, Mr. Swain, for being here tonight. Congrats on making it this far. Tell me what psychological steps you take to earn or, just gain the respect of someone that you may disagree with.
So I'll preface this by saying that I work in communities across the state, and particularly rural communities, and my office strives to be nonpartisan and to help every community possible, and we sometimes face some challenges there because we're the governor's rural initiative. And so working with communities across the state that have different political ideology can present a challenge, and the best way that I feel like you break that down is to really boil down to just the issues and to see what's motivating and driving people. And I think a lot of times you recognize that there's way more common ground than you maybe initially realize. And so that's kind of my first step. I will say that I take pride in being a bridge builder. I think that that's a unique skill set that I have, that I'm very good at working between people or groups to find common ground, to reach compromise, and to ultimately kind of build a shared vision. And I think my work has kind of underscored that.
what are the factors that you consider when trying to, I'm going to skip that question. I think it's relative to the one I just asked. Could you conceptualize your ideal city with 3 actionable policies?
Yeah, so my ideal city would, I feel like this is kind of a trick question. It would obviously provide housing for everyone. It would have immense green space and environmental mitigations, and public safety would be a non-issue. The second part of that, though, is the tricky part, is how to get to that. I think education is a huge part, and community investment is another one. So ensuring that communities have the toolkit to thrive, whether that is the spaces, whether it's green space or community centers, whether it is the education system that they're in and having the best schools possible, or just like the energy that I think a tight-knit community has. I see that all across Durham, so I think it's very possible, but there's obviously a long way to go.
I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say green space? If there was green space, it wouldn't be a public safety issue?
Oh, no, I'm saying public safety is one of the 3.
Oh, okay.
I said
all right.
no, sorry. I said not, where public safety is not an issue, was one of the 3 kind of idealized things. Housing, having housing for everyone. So no need for a housing shortage, which if Durham's budget was completely expended, still could not meet the need. Having green space, and then eliminating public safety is an issue, or crime is an issue.
Okay. Speaking of public safety, what would be your long-term, short-term, and public safety policies that you would promote?
Yeah, so this is an area that...
And do you believe that police officers or polices should or should not be a part of it?
Yes, so I think public safety, again, is about strengthening communities and education and workforce opportunities, or employment opportunities. I think that there is a world where policing is, not needed, but that's not now and not here. So policing is part of the public safety strategy that I think I would support, and I think a more short-term goal would be to identify ways to minimize the need for policing, to ensure that there are other programs. Like I know that Durham has implemented HEART recently, so being able to respond to nonviolent instances with a hotline and a crisis task force, and then to also be able to provide follow-up services after that.
Good. And could you differentiate safety? I'll wait until it, okay. Could you differentiate safety and, could you differentiate safety and then reducing crime? Could you differentiate the 2?
Yeah, so public safety would involve all aspects of ensuring that human life are protected. So looking at transportation fatalities would be part of public safety. Crime is part of crime is addressed through public safety. Reducing crime, I think, is one aspect or one positive outcome of public safety.
Thank you. I appreciate those responses, actually. And this is for a matter of process. We meet on Thursdays at 1 p.m. We're responsible for also meeting on, that's every first and third Thursdays. We also meet on Mondays at 7 p.m., first and third Mondays, but each of us have about 8 or 9 committees that we have to serve on. And that's in addition to all of the public-facing engagements that you do outside of those standing meetings. While it's unfair, it's the system in which we govern in, would you have a problem with meeting that flexible demand?
No, I think I could accommodate that meeting schedule.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure
thank you.
speaking with you. At this point, do you want to? Yeah, I'll do that. But as far as process, going from here, next steps. I'm sorry. Thank you. You can. You can. Thank you.
Thank you. So earlier this evening, we did address questions that the applicants had sent. The next step of the process will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Each applicant will have 30 minutes for public support. How you choose to divvy up that 30 minutes is up to you. Your supporters can either sign up or and join us on Zoom, or they can be here in person. We are asking everyone to have their folks sign up with the city clerk's office by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, January 10th. So that's the next step of the process, and then we will be voting next Tuesday, January 16th at 9:30 in the morning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so we will announce then applicants can wait and be sworn in, whoever is chosen will be sworn in that evening at our council meeting. So that way, if you are chosen and you want to bring family or whatnot to come in, you have that opportunity. I just want to say there are literally 4 of us on this dais who've been through this process. So we really appreciate that you stepped up for your community, and I can personally attest to it. It's an intimidating process, and so everyone's done just remarkably well, and everyone should be really, really proud of themselves. Thank you.
Thanks for covering those procedures. Before we conclude with any comments by any council members, are there any questions? All right. Colleagues, any comments? Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to the public who came out and being interested in very interesting things in Durham. We will call this meeting, not call it to order, we will adjourn at 9:34 p.m. Thank you all so much. Thanks, colleagues.